California Governor Gavin Newsom last week vetoed a bill that would have allowed cannabis cafes to offer weed, food, and beverages to patrons at licensed establishments reminiscent of the famed coffee shops in Amsterdam. The measure, Assembly Bill 374, was passed by the California legislature last month after being introduced earlier this year by Democratic Assembly member Matt Haney. Under current California law, cannabis consumption lounges cannot sell freshly prepared food to their patrons. A rule change adopted in November of last year allows lounges to offer prepackaged food and beverages and for customers to bring their own freshly prepared items on a limited basis, but the businesses themselves are denied the opportunity to serve most non-infused products to their customers. Haney's bill would have allowed California's cannabis consumption lounges to sell freshly prepared food and drinks and to host live entertainment events. In the Netherlands, more than 700 cannabis cafes, often referred to as coffee shops, draw 1.5 million visitors per year, according to information from Haney's office. Allowing the state's consumption lounges to operate under a similar business model would give the businesses new economic opportunities and could serve as a draw for tourists and locals to visit struggling downtown business districts. A report published by the United States Census Bureau recently shows the progress of cannabis tax revenue numbers for each state. It's the first report of its kind from the Bureau and begins with the Q3 of 2021. The agency refers to this data as an experimental product, but showcases excise taxes collected since Q3 of 2021. Washington and Colorado, the first two states to legalize cannabis, led with the most in collected excise sales taxes, with $818.5 million and $648.1 million. Data for Oregon, however, another early adopter of legalization, only collected a total of $364.6 million during the same time frame. On the other hand, California's total reached $1.4 billion during the same period, and Illinois collected $491 million. While the United States Census Bureau published a spreadsheet with all of the data, it did not include automatic totals. However, manual addition reveals that states with reported cannabis excise sales tax numbers totaled out to $5.7 billion since Q3 of 2021. Many states reported record-breaking numbers for monthly sales revenue, which also won't be showing on the United States Census Bureau reports yet. BDSA also forecasts a return to modest sales growth in California by 2025, with a rebounding increase in sales to $5.24 billion in 2027. But competitors such as Canada are also expected to grow, with a 9% increase in adult use sales by the end of this year, for a total of $4.6 billion, but a decrease in sales from medical cannabis by $200 million by 2027. Cannabis is flying off shelves in Connecticut, according to state data, and adult-use cannabis transactions accounted for over half of the money coming in. Adult-use sales began on January 10th, and sales revenue has increased every month since the market launched. The Department of Consumer Protection announced in an October 10th press release that new preliminary data shows combined sales for adult use and medical cannabis total to over $25 million for the period from September 1st to September 30th, 2023. The numbers do not include adult use cannabis taxes, and medical cannabis patients never have to pay taxes on cannabis purchases. But now you must add home cultivation to the picture. Officials with the Department of Consumer Protection marked the launch of home cannabis cultivation, which went into effect on July 1st. Under the state's regulations for home cannabis cultivation, adults ages 21 and older are permitted to grow up to 6 cannabis plants, including 3 immature and 3 mature flowering plants. Plants must be kept secure from children, pets, and others who should not be allowed access to cannabis. It's not entirely clear how home cultivation will impact adult use sales. The GOP's nominee to replace Representative Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House, one of the most powerful positions in the United States government, has opposed nearly every cannabis bill he's encountered during the past 15 years in office. Scalise dropped out of the House Speaker race Thursday evening. In a closed-door meeting to replace McCarthy as Speaker Wednesday, Representative Steve Scalise was selected as the clear nominee. Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan, the next contender, lost the nomination in a vote 100 113 to 99. On Thursday, however, Scalise appeared to be short on votes to become the next speaker. McCarthy was successfully dethroned as Speaker of the House October 2nd in a rare ouster led by Representative Matt Gaetz. The Associated Press reports that the Speaker ouster was a first in United States history, and done with the efforts of a hard-right faction that splintered. The future of cannabis legislation at the federal level hinges on cooperation from House leadership. New research carried out over 3 years in Marlboro's Sauvignon Blanc vineyard by grape grower Kirsty Harkness and viticulture researcher Dr. Mark Crosno has found that hemp is a viable cover crop, at least when it comes to the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc vineyards. The research, as outlined by New Zealand wine grower, found that the hemp did not compete with the vines and beneficially affected soils and wines. During the country's dry season, the hemp also became established without supplemental irrigation when other crops failed to survive, allowing the plants to sequester carbon longer into the season. For United States regions like California, which have both booming wine and hemp markets, these findings could potentially prove useful for the future of both industries. A potential game changer for the future of wine, Harkness pointed to the hemp's ability to further benefit the affected soils and wines, calling the finding very exciting. The Colorado Department of Revenue released a monthly cannabis sales report for August, the latest month available, showing that adult use and medical cannabis sales surpassed $15 billion. While the overall picture looks good, sales are actually down during the past few years since peaking during the pandemic, and the downward trend worries some analysts. The data shows Colorado adult use and medical cannabis sales reached a total of $15,028,995,376. Since 2016, the state has sold $1-2 billion in cannabis each year. But because of oversupply issues ultimately leading to lower prices, Colorado sales are expected to be lower in 2023 than prior years. It's time for big pharma companies that were caught lying to the public to pay up. A new report compiled by Consumer Shield suggests the past decade was defined by record-high settlements and penalties in the pharmaceutical sector, totaling over $80 billion in fines and penalties. London Love's Business reports that the study shows that since 2010, the pharmaceutical industry has incurred $82.8 billion in penalties during over 500 instances of recorded violations due to drug and medical device safety non-observance, unapproved promotion of medical products, breaches of the False Claims Act, and other violations. The biggest culprit, Johnson & Johnson, clocked in with over 45 violation records during the study period, leading to a total of $24.5 billion in penalties. Johnson & Johnson paid $18 billion in penalties over the past 5 years in opioid and talc cases alone. Next is Teva Pharmaceuticals with penalties of $8.5 billion, AbbVie with penalties of $7.1 billion, GSK plc with penalties of $5.6 billion, and Pfizer with penalties of $3.2 billion. Hundreds of thousands of people overdosed and died in the process. Nearly 88% of opioid-involved overdose deaths involved synthetic opioids, and opioids were the cause of 80,411 overdose deaths in 2021, 75.4% of all drug overdose deaths, the CDC reported in 2021 when overdoses peaked. Compare that to heroin overdoses, which caused just 9,000 overdoses in 2021 unless they were mixed with opioids. Almost 10 times more OD'd on synthetic opioids. Most of us know about the ravages of the opioid epidemic, but what's the deal with talc? Pharmaceuticals can kill you in other ways. Talcum powder lawsuits claim consumers were diagnosed with cancer after using talc-based Johnson & Johnson baby powder. Switzerland will allow Europe's first non-medical cannabis dispensaries to open and operate as part of a study to examine how controlled access to legal cannabis may affect health and consumption patterns of regular cannabis consumers. An announcement was made Friday about Grashaus projects by German CBD and cannabinoid research company Sanity Group, which said that in tandem with the Swiss Institute for Addiction and Health Research, their initiative to dispense legal cannabis to a small area in Switzerland called Basel-Landschaft had been approved by the Swiss government. Basel-Landschaft is home to just under 4,000 Swiss citizens who are eligible to serve as participants in the study. The study will be led by Professor Dr. Michael Schaub, Scientific Director of the Swiss Institute for Addiction and Health Research. The cannabis for the study will be provided by a Swiss cultivation company called Swiss Extract and will include a variety of different cannabis mediums like flower, hash, extracts, and so on. Switzerland has actually granted several Swiss cities individual approval to start their own pilot cannabis programs. Zurich, Basel, Biel, Bienne, Lucerne, Geneva, and Bern, no pun intended, have all received approval in the last year to begin similar programs. According to a Forbes article, Zurich actually is still seeking 400 people to participate in its cannabis program because the area generally lacks cannabis consumers.